understand why this device, the AYN Thor, matters so much to me, first we have to go on a little bit of a journey. It started years ago when I was a kid and I sold my original 3DS XL. At the time, I was diving headfirst into PC gaming, chasing high refresh rates and pixel-perfect resolutions. And the 3DS's hardware, as much as I adored its library, just couldn't keep up. It felt like a necessary evolution, but I missed it. I missed the form factor, the portability, and the unique magic of that dual screen library. So last year, I decided to try and recapture that feeling. I ended up importing a beautiful red 3DS LL directly from Japan. And for those of you who might have been with the channel for a while, you might even remember the unboxing video. The nostalgia hit me like a ton of bricks. It was fantastic for about a week. Then that same old feeling of dissatisfaction crept back in. The reality that the screen technology in 2025 was impossible to ignore. The colors felt muted. The 240p resolution was a blurry fog compared to modern displays, and the panel itself had started to yellow with age, as so many of them do. I was holding a piece of hardware that I loved, playing games that I adored, but the experience itself was fundamentally compromised by outdated tech. I had spent the money to chase a feeling, only to be disappointed all over again. That's when I realized the problem wasn't just nostalgia. I didn't want my old 3DS back. I wanted what the 3DS represented, a premium, portable, dual screen experience. And I was convinced that if a company could just take that perfect form factor, fuse it with vibrant OLED screens, and the powerful SoC processors of today, that they would create the perfect handheld. And that brings us to this, the AYN Thor. This is, on paper, the exact device that I was looking for. It takes that iconic clamshell design, integrates not one, but two gorgeous, high-resolution AMOLED displays, and powers it all with the flagship-tier Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 SoC. This effectively brings me to my guiding question for my deep dive review. Is this the device that finally breaks the cycle of disappointment? Can the AYN Thor deliver on the promise of a truly modern 3DS? Combining the ergonomic magic of the original form factor with the screen and performance that can satisfy a modern, tech-focused gamer? Or is this another beautifully flawed attempt that misses the mark entirely? Let's go ahead and find the definitive answer to that question. So let's just hop right in. Okay, so before we get hands-on, it's absolutely critical to understand the product lineup and what your money gets you. Full disclosure, this Black Pro model was sent over from AYN for review. However, I also purchased a Rainbow Pro SKU with my own money during the pre-order phase. As always, AYN has zero input into this video, all findings are my own, and I'm here to give you my full and honest thoughts to what I think about it. AYN has structured the Thor lineup into 4 distinct tiers, and the choice you make will fundamentally define the device's capabilities. So let's break it down tier by tier. First up is the Thor Lite, starting at $249 US. This model uses the Snapdragon 865 processor, 8GB of LPDDR5 RAM, and 128 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage. The 865 is a respectable chip. It'll handle all the 16 and 32-bit emulation flawlessly. It'll run PSP and Dreamcast with significant upscaling, and it'll handle a good portion of your GameCube and PS2 library. But you often need to be realistic about your expectations. often sticking to native resolutions and using tweaks for more demanding titles. Think of the Lite like a 3DS Plus machine. If your primary goal is to have the absolute best screen experience for a Nintendo DS library, with the ability to dabble in some higher-end systems, this is a fantastic value. But if you're chasing high-resolution PS2 and Switch emulation, this is not the model for you. For an extra $50, you get to the base model at $300. This is without question the most important upgrade in this entire lineup. This is where you get the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and I cannot overstate what a massive leap this is. We're going from a capable high-end chip from 2020 to a true flagship chip from late 2022. This processor is incredible for an emulation handheld, essentially doubling the GPU power of the 865. This upgrade is the price of admission for high-end emulation. It unlocks 3x and 4x resolution scaling in most GameCube and PS2 titles. It's what makes Wii U emulation viable, and it also gives you a fighting chance with a good portion of higher-end emulation. The base model comes with 8GB of RAM and a faster 128GB of UFS 4.0 storage. If you want the best performance per dollar, this is definitely the one. Next, for another $50, we have the Pro model at $350 US, which is the unit I have here, and the one that I bought. This tier bumps you up to 12GB of RAM and 256GB of internal storage. Ultimately, this is what I consider the enthusiast sweet spot. Why the extra RAM? While 8GB is definitely sufficient for most Android tasks and emulation, some high-end emulation titles, modern Android games, and future, more intensive emulators can certainly benefit from the extra headroom. If you plan on trying PC emulation, this is your minimum entry model. The 256GB of storage is also a much more comfortable starting point. In an era where Android game files are getting larger and larger, finally at the peak, we have the Max model for $430 US. This is the all-out version with a massive 16GB of RAM and 1TB of storage. Let me be clear who this is for. This is for the bleeding edge tinkerer, and for someone who probably doesn't want to use a microSD card. If you plan on seriously diving into the world of Windows on ARM emulation, using projects like GameHub or Game Native, where you need to install large PC games directly onto the internal storage and can leverage that extra RAM for complex translation layers, then the Max model definitely has a purpose. For 99% of users staying on the Android ecosystem for emulation and native gaming, this is complete overkill. Beyond the core specs, all 8 Gen 2 models share the same top-tier features: Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.3, a 6000 mAh battery with 27W fast charging, and DisplayPort video out over USB-C. AYN is also offering a few key accessories. There's a simple, clear TPU shell, and a more substantial ergonomic grip, each for about $15. There's also a carrying case. I definitely consider the case or a screen protector. However, with the device being able to fold onto itself, that usually does a good job at protecting the glass anyways. It's one benefit of a clamshell. Let's get this thing out of the box. The first thing that you're greeted with is obviously the handheld. They give you a small overlay card at the top, a small quality control stamp showing that it passed the quality inspection. The included USB-C cable is a pleasant surprise. It's a sturdy AYN branded cable that feels far more durable than the standard packing cables we often see. Picking up the Thor for the first time is quite the experience. The device has a density of 366 grams. That feels substantial and premium. It doesn't feel hollow or cheap in any way. The textured black plastic on my unit has a very fine, almost pleasant texture. This specific finish is better than it was on the Portal for resisting fingerprints. But be warned, the full glass front will pick up a ton of smudges. I'm hoping to see a good oleophobic screen protector eventually. The shell picks up a few, but it's actually surprisingly difficult to get any smudges on this. Either way, it hasn't bothered me much as I thought it would, and I love how they've gone for a textured finish here. Let's do a meticulous tour of the physical hardware. The bottom edge is the I/O hub. The volume rocker and power buttons have a satisfying tactile click with no mushiness. The USB-C port is nearly perfectly centered and feels secure. The 3.5mm headphone jack is a welcome inclusion. Thanks, AYN. And the microSD card slot is protected by a nice cover. So let's open it up and address the big elephant in the room, the hinge. My conclusion is that the hinge is exceptionally well engineered. The mechanism inside is entirely metal. The tension is perfectly tuned. It's stiff enough that there's barely any screen wobble. Yet it's smooth enough to open with a single deliberate motion. Now I do want to point out a small physical detail that I observed. There's a tiny amount of horizontal slide to the hinge if you try to move it left and right. We're talking less than a millimeter or two. While the vertical tension is rock solid, this lateral movement is definitely present. For what it's worth, I noticed exactly the same behavior on the Retroid Pocket Flip and the Flip 2. I never had any issues with my Flip or my Flip 2, but I know a few people did. Either way, I think this is a much better hinge. I'll keep my eye on this over the long term. It features several soft clicks for common viewing angles, but it can hold its position firmly anywhere along the 180-degree range of motion. I also inspected the plastic housing around the hinge, looking for any signs of stress or hairline fractures, and I found absolutely none. For what it's worth, I haven't found any quality control issues on any AYN device so far, minus one dead pixel, which I found on my Portal several months later. So let's talk about living with this device, the controls, the ergonomics, and this is where the inherent compromises of compact, portable design become very clear. The analog sticks are fantastic. They're Hall sensors. This effectively means no drift. They have the perfect amount of tension and a nice grippy cap, and a crisp L3 and R3 click. The placement is excellent for modern dual-stick gaming. The dead zones are very minimal out of the box, and they can be fully calibrated in AYN software. They're recessed into the device obviously, but even so, they still provide a decent amount of pivot. As far as the D-pad goes, this is a classic AYN Vita-style D-pad. It uses a membrane that provides a soft, rolling pivot. It's also very precise. I've run through hours of classic retro games, and it handles both precise platforming and complex fighting games without issue. The major drawback here is its low placement. It's clearly been deprioritized in favor of the left analog stick. To use it comfortably, you have to shift your grip downwards, which is a common trait of something with this layout. But it's still something to be aware of if you primarily play D-pad driven games. The ABXY buttons are also rubber membrane. They're quiet, have good travel distance, and pop back up with a satisfying, non-mushy response. They're well sized and spaced comfortably, but I appreciate the small detail that their height doesn't cause them to rub on the top screen's bezel when closed, nor around the opening to either side of them. The start and select buttons are also perfectly placed for easy access. No complaints here at all. In regards to the shoulders and the triggers, now this is the area with the most significant design trade-off. The R1 and L1 shoulders are clicky, responsive micro switches that work perfectly. The L2 and R2 triggers are analog, which is a huge plus for emulating systems like GameCube and Dreamcast. From a pure performance standpoint, they're great. However, these represent a major departure from the 3DS's design philosophy. Unlike the low-profile, inline bumpers on Nintendo's offerings, these triggers are flared and stick out from the chassis. This is a modern design choice that provides a bit more travel and control, but it comes at the cost of portability. You can definitely feel them snag a bit when you're sliding them into a tight pocket, which is something that never really happened to me on the 3DS. Ultimately, I see this as a modern evolution. It's a trade-off. AYN has prioritized better control and analog input over the sleeker, more pocketable profile of the past. It's a valid choice, but it's one of the key things that makes the Thor feel different from the classic hardware that inspired it. The overall comfort is the trade-off, but it lacks the sculpted grips that makes devices like the Odin Portal so comfortable for extended gaming. It feels very much like an oversized premium 3DS, which is exactly what it's trying to be. But what if you want both? What if you want that supreme portability on the go, but crave proper ergonomics for long sessions at home? That's where AYN's official ergonomic grip comes in. And frankly, I think it's an essential accessory. First off, the quality. The matte black plastics used here are excellent. I'd put them on par with the fantastic grip that they made for the Odin 2 Portal. It resists fingerprints beautifully, and it feels substantial in the hand. AYN is definitely getting really good at making these. The installation is actually cleverly designed. See this small gap between the main body and the screen assembly? That's actually the channel where the top edge of the grip slides in, creating a secure, seamless fit. It's very easy to install. The difference in comfort is immediate and very profound. The added depth makes accessing the analog sticks and the D-pad much more comfortable, transforming the device from a portable first handheld into a genuinely comfortable at-home gaming console. My recommendation is pretty simple if you plan on playing the Thor primarily at home. I'd go as far as to say just leave the grip on. But the real magic is the flexibility. When I'm heading out to a cafe or to work, I can just pop this off in like 2 seconds and slide the slim, stock device into my bag. Maximizing that portability factor, it's essentially the best of both worlds. Physical hardware is only half the story. Let's power this on and talk about the experience actually using it. And we have to start with those glorious screens. These dual AMOLED panels are, in my opinion, the Thor's single greatest strength. The 6-inch 1080p 120Hz display is one of the best I've ever used on a handheld of this size. The dark backgrounds are truly black, making the colorful sprites pop with incredible intensity. The color reproduction is phenomenal. The brightness range is also fantastic. At its peak, it's bright enough for comfortable use outdoors in the shade. In direct sunlight, it's a little bit of a struggle, but that's true for almost any display under 1000 nits. At its minimum, it gets incredibly dim, which is perfect for late night gaming without disturbing anyone. The 120Hz refresh rate makes Android's UI feel exceptionally smooth, and it's a game changer for high frame rate gaming or native Android games that support it. However, just a critical heads up for retro gamers because the panel runs at 120Hz. You have to ensure you manually lock the frame rate within emulators like RetroArch. If you don't, an emulator is going to try to run a classic 60 FPS game at double speed, which is not obviously the intended experience. It's a simple toggle, but one of the essential ones to get right. If you leave it off, games kind of feel like they're being fast forward. You can also just tap the 120Hz mode and set it back down to 60. Everything kind of feels much more natural then. The 120Hz mode also introduces another bug. When the top screen is set to 120Hz, the bottom one runs at a native 60. You can see some pretty visible tearing on the bottom panel. It goes vertically up the screen around the middle point. However, you don't always notice this, but if you scroll down some pages while having a game that supports 120Hz, it seems to trigger it a lot more. It's so weird, it's like VSync has been turned off on the bottom screen because this one is trying to run at 120Hz. It's an interesting bug. How you can kind of see it when you're scrolling down like this with a solid background. See how it's getting cut off? I first noticed this when I had a game running on the top and I opened a guide on the bottom screen. I was genuinely surprised to see it, as I've never encountered something like that on an Android device before. The good news is, I think both of these are software bugs and they can be fixed in a future OTA update. And the even better news is, there's an easy resolution right now. Just set both screens to 60Hz in the quick settings. It's a good reminder that while the hardware here is excellent, the software still has a few quirks for AYN to iron out. The bottom screen is just as vibrant as the top one, ensuring a consistent visual experience when playing through dual-screen games. Both are responsive touchscreens. I played for hours on heavy touch input games, and the input was flawless. Obviously, it's not like native hardware, but you can get used to it relatively quickly. The device has full Widevine Level 1 certification, which means you can play full HD playback in DRM-protected apps like Netflix and Crunchyroll. Furthermore, HDR playback on YouTube is absolutely gorgeous. The combination of perfect blacks and high peak brightness makes content pop in a way few handhelds can match. At 4K, it looks stunning, downscaled to 1080p on this panel. Honestly, this is the second most beautiful display I've ever seen on a handheld, running neck and neck with the Odin 2 Portal. In fact, I'd say that Thor's panel might be even slightly brighter at its peak. The top panel has an incredibly minimal bezel too, particularly on the top edge, which makes it look like a beautiful modern screen. The software experience is built on the clean foundation of Android 13. AYN's custom launcher is simple but effective, intelligently separating the home screen and the app drawer on two different displays. However, the real power lies in AYN-specific software tools, custom built for the AYN Thor. The quick settings panel, which is swiped down from the top, gives you immediate access to the performance modes, fan control, screen refresh rate toggles, and controller settings. You can switch the controller between the standard Xbox, the disconnected, or the Nintendo Switch. There's also a charging separation feature, which allows the device to directly run off-the-wall power without charging the battery. This reduces the heat during long plugged-in sessions. Pressing the dedicated AYN button brings up the Thor Control Center overlay. This is the heart of the dual-screen experience. In the mode window, the independent brightness sliders are a godsend, especially since these are two unique panels. The audio mixer is a feature that feels so obvious and essential in retrospect that I can't believe it's the first time we're seeing it implemented this well. And the ability to quickly toggle display modes or access the performance monitor without leaving your game is fantastic. It's a robust software suite, but it still has room to grow. Also, while AYN's launcher is good, more complex Android front ends like Daiji Show and Beacon are not designed for dual screens and can kind of behave erratically. For the best experience, you'll probably want to stick to the stock launcher for now, but I opted to use Daiji Show anyways, and I just put my hardware overlay metrics on the bottom. Now let's talk thermals, because context is key. Downloading large games with Game Native with the fan set to Sport and the CPU mode set to high performance, I saw the SoC peak at about 91 degrees Celsius. While that sounds high, this is still within the chip's official thermal specification. More importantly, during actual gaming and emulation, temperatures were consistently excellent, hovering around 71 to 75 degrees Celsius. The device gets warm, but never uncomfortably hot, especially where you hold your hands. proving the cooling is more than up to the task. The fan is audible, but it produces a low-frequency hum that's far less intrusive than high-pitched fans on many other devices. Interestingly, I've noticed even at the highest sports setting, the fan never exceeds 50% of its maximum speed. I'm not sure if this is a deliberate choice from AYN to keep the noise levels down, but the result is a fan that's remarkably quiet compared to the jet engine whine you can get from some other high-performance handhelds. For Nintendo DS and 3DS, this is the Thor's home turf. It's almost boring to talk about because the performance is so effortlessly perfect. You can crank up the internal resolution to 4 or 5x on virtually every single title in both libraries, resulting in razor-sharp 3D graphics that look like a modern HD remaster. In my opinion, this is the definitive way to play these libraries in 2025. That said, definitive doesn't always mean without a few initial software quirks. Specifically in the Melon DS emulator, I noticed some audio glitching right out of the box. Thankfully, this is an easy fix. In the emulator settings, scroll down till you see the audio. Change the audio latency to low and the bitrate to 10-bit, and the crackling disappears. It's also worth noting that sometimes you can get graphical glitches. This only happens in specific titles like Kirby Squeak Squad. I guess this is just a reminder that the software is still maturing, but based on the progress we've seen so far, I'm pretty confident that these issues will kind of iron themselves out. The same need for specific software applies to 3DS emulation as well. For example, the emulator Azahar exhibits quite a bit of stuttering, even with asynchronous shader compilation on. However, the latest version of Citra, designed for dual-screen devices, doesn't have this problem. I kinda wonder if it's this hardware shader because I don't see that in the other emulator. But either way, this one runs much smoother, enabling hybrid Uber shaders and allowing the shaders to pre-compile before you start the game resolves the issue entirely, leading to a smooth experience. But for the time being anyways, Azahar remains a stuttery experience, at least until its shaders are fully built through gameplay. So my recommendation for 3DS is to use the dual screen version of Citra for the best possible experience right from the start. The Dolphin emulator runs beautifully on the Thor, instead of running through the usual suspects. I wanted to focus on a title known for fast action, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Performance is excellent at 3x resolution, and rumble is really good too. Again, by using Dolphin's hybrid Uber shaders and taking a moment to compile the shaders before jumping in, I experienced 0 distracting shader compilation stutters. The device was sipping an impressively low 4 watts of power on average for this title. Now, an interesting metric I observed on my 12GB Pro model was that total system RAM usage for GameCube can jump anywhere between 8 to 9GB. This is something that owners of the 8GB base model need to keep in mind for the most demanding titles. If you have that 8GB base model, go to your settings and go to the Thor settings. Make sure to turn on that virtual RAM swap. This will use 4GB of your internal UFS as extra RAM. If you have that 12 or 16GB model, make sure to leave this off. The internal memory is much faster than the UFS storage. The key takeaway here is that the entire GameCube library, for all intents and purposes, is a solved frontier on the Thor. If an emulator exists and it's well optimized for Android, this device has enough power to master it. So a quick word on the battery life. I conducted 3 different rundown tests from 100% charge, and this is the kind of battery life I got. It's definitely not as good as the Odin 2 or the Odin 2 Portal. It's still pretty decent on battery, as well as streaming YouTube with the top screen at 100% and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on. The battery lasted for a grand total of 8 hours and 20 minutes. What's fascinating is that I ran this test twice, once with both screens active and once forcing playback only on the top screen, with the bottom panel disabled. and the results were identical. This indicates that the idle power draw of the second screen is negligible, which speaks volumes about AYN's software optimization. This makes it a fantastic media device. It's not quite as long as the single screen on the Odin 2 or the Odin 2 Portal, but given it's powering 2 panels, it's an understandable and excellent result. These are very solid numbers for a device with this much power and 2 bright OLED displays. The 27-watt fast charge will get you to about 0 to 50 in about 35 minutes, giving you a full charge in about an hour. But for those long days, a reliable power bank is non-negotiable. Full disclosure, the folks at INIU sent over their P62E1 power bank for me to take a look at. However, I want to be clear that I've been a fan of INIU products for a while now, and their customer service has always been top-notch. This is my daily carry, a 2-year-old TomTalk Sling. It's a smaller bag, separate from the one that I use for my Zephyrus G14, and it's perfect for carrying a device like the Thor. If you want, you can put it in the back, and there's lots of foam padding, but you can also carry a much bigger device in the back and put the Thor up at the front. The extra room at the front is perfect for carrying a little power bank like this, and this one has become my go-to for ARM devices. It's extremely light at only 324 grams, and I love the vibrant orange color. Price-wise, it's also very reasonable, typically between $45 and $60 US, depending on the sales. At first, I didn't even notice this little feature, but this one comes with a little wrist strap, and I thought, well, that's kind of neat. If you look really closely, it actually doubles as a 100-watt USB cable. You can pop it off and you've got a USB cable and you didn't even know it. Pretty cool. Just be careful not to take this off, because if you do, it's pretty difficult to get it back in. But it's a fun and intuitive piece of design that means you never have to pack an extra USB cable. Performance-wise, it's a perfect match for the Thor. It supports 65-watt fast charging and can fully recharge the Thor roughly 2 times over. For ARM handhelds like this one or even the Switch 2, it's kind of an ideal travel companion. You definitely want something with more capacity for a big x86 handheld or a laptop. But for this entire class of device, I can't recommend it enough. It's tiny, but it has a huge capacity of 73 watt-hours. If you're interested, I'll leave a link for this down below. So after all that exhaustive testing, we circle back to the central question. Is the AYN Thor the modern 3DS successor that we've been waiting for? Does it provide an authentic dual screen experience, but elevated with modern technology? To answer that, let's be blunt and summarize the good and the bad. On the cons list, the black model is slightly smudgy, but leagues better than the old plastics on the Portal, enough so that it doesn't bother me much at all. The low D-pad isn't good for retro purists. This, of course, is me being picky. There's very little not to like about this handheld. Ultimately, my critiques are almost entirely cosmetic, like the glass face being a magnet for fingerprints, which speaks volumes about how well engineered the core experience is. But the pros list is formidable. The build quality is absolutely top tier. The hinge is robust and feels reliable, but time will tell how well it holds up. The performance you get from the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 models is class leading for a device of this size, opening up a vast universe of high-end emulation. And the dual AMOLED screens are, simply put, the best displays on any retro handheld in the market today, alongside the Odin 2 Portal. From the devices I've tested anyways, they are the star of the show and the core of the experience. So who is this device for, and should you avoid it? You should avoid the Thor if you prioritize maximum ergonomic comfort above all else. A device with large grips like the Odin 2 Portal will serve you better for long sessions, but you should absolutely buy the Thor if you're like me. If you have a deep reverence for dual screen libraries of the DS and 3DS, if you believe that the form factor is inseparable from the experience, If you've been waiting for a device that not only plays those games, but makes them look more vibrant and beautiful than you ever thought possible, and if you want all of that in a premium, pocketable device that also has the power to handle almost anything that you can throw at it, then this is it. This is the one. It directly solves the very issues that made me sell my original 3DS XL. It replaces that dim, low-resolution screen with breathtaking OLED panels. It fixes the awkward, compromised feel of dual-screen emulation on single-screen devices. It is, for my money, the definitive way to experience this iconic library of games in 2025. It's an exceptional, ambitious, and ultimately successful piece of engineering. This review is a snapshot in time, but now I want to hear from you. Are the ergonomic compromises a deal breaker? What about the software bugs? What are your thoughts on the pricing tiers? Let's have a detailed discussion in the comments below. Thank you so much for taking the time to go on this deep dive with me. If you found this review helpful, a like and subscribe are always appreciated. As always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.